Good morning, everyone. So today we shall discuss a few main concepts in Python language. As many of you are aware, Python is a high-level interpreted general-purpose programming language. So this scientific programming language is used for many purposes. It is generally intended in nature. It too has a focus on object-oriented programming aspects. So in this programming language, today we shall focus on two essential aspects, that is file handling and binary files. So in the learning objectives of data file handling, we shall emphasize on the following aspects. We shall understand what is the necessity of storing data file in permanent storage. We shall also focus upon how input and output function works. We shall differentiate between the type of files that is been existing. We shall also look into certain commands of how to open and close a file, read and write data in the file, along with data manipulation using files in the files. Now, as all of you are aware, during the program execution phase, there is a limitation of the data that is being stored in the main memory to be retrieved every now and then frequently. So it's always advisable that we save it in a secondary storage device on locations that we call it as files. Now, files are the places on the disk where we have a sequence of related data which has been stored. So it is just a stream of data, nothing else, along with the structure of data. That is not being given too much on emphasis. So as I discussed, we shall be focusing upon two types of files, text as well as the binary files. So text files is a sequence of lines that has been following the ASCII format, American Standard Code for Information Interchange. Now the default character coding known as Python is ASCII. The line termination ending with the end of line is also coming under this type of file. Now, this type of files are generally in human readable form and can be easily created using any type of text editor. Moving upon the second category, that is the binary files. So this type of files are normally not that human readable. They are numbers which are stored in files, and we generally use them for numerical operations. So normally a stream of bytes is interpreted as a string. It's a numeric value, but it will be a wrong interpretation of data. We are not getting the desired output after file processing activity. So when we deal with binary type of data, it's so important that we interpret the correct data type while reading the files. Let me remind you, while we deal with modules, when we deal with the binary files, we have to focus with special modules, and most of them will be ending with the suffix B. Let's move on to the first one of how to handle the data files using file object. Now, the Python language focuses or gives more importance on object-oriented programming. So here we are well aware about the objects. Now, objects are created using open or file function. Now, if you look into the file object, this is how the main syntax is. So we have, when we create a file object, we open it. Open function is essential since this function is used for creating it. So we have a file object that has been created, and once it has been created, we can access it using different methods. We have also functions available for its manipulation. If you look at the syntax, open function is used to create a file object. Here, first of all, we need to specify the file name. For followed by the access mode or buffering. So the second and third parameter, access mode or buffering, are optional parameters. We shall see one by one. Now the file name could be either a string, constant, or a variable. Normally the files are stored in the Python directory. If at all, if we need to explicitly open another file, we need to correctly mention the path name in this file name space. Now moving upon to access modes, this describes how the file is to be used throughout the entire program execution. And at certain phases, when in order to calculate to what extent memory has been used, we need to have an emphasis on buffering also. So once the entire program has been finished out, we just need to flush it out. Now, as you see in the screen, these are the various modes of access. So we have R, that is used for reading mode. RB is emphasized for module that is related with binary files. We have also the W mode, that is used for writing. Now this mode is essential for creating a non-existing file. If at all, if we have a file, or say for example text file with few lines, and if we need to rewrite the content, it's always advisable that we open it using W or writing mode. So at each mode we use it, or we open it where we have the file pointer at the beginning. The third one is the A, or the appending mode. Now to the existing content of the file, if you need to add a new further content or further additions, it's always advisable that we go with append mode. As you see, we have separate modules for binary related data also. For R we have RB, for W we have WB, for AB it means appending mode for binary related content. Similarly, we have also R+. So R+ is a further enhancement of reading mode. So it is also used for both reading and writing purposes. We have W purpose. So here W plus, WB plus, here the file pointer is placed at the beginning for writing into data. So what happens is that the existing file gets overwritten. A new file could also be created using this mode. And we have A plus or AB plus, which is used for both appending and reading. So here the file pointer is placed at the end of the file in an existing one. Let me remind you, we cannot create a non-existing file. Then the last one is X. So this mode is used for creating a new file. It returns a file, it returns an error if at all the file is not at all existing. Let us look into a few examples. So here in this slide, you can see that we have created a file object F, and we open it for the specifying the location sample text. Now assume the sample text we have the content India is my country. Now the command f.read will be looking to the entire content that is specified in the file. Now if you look into the third line, it specifies in what mode the file is being opened. So we have opened the file sample.txt in the read plus mode. So as I told, the file pointer will be moving on to the beginning of the file, and this has a dual function of both reading and writing. So it read only just the parts, and moving on to the further enhancement of read mode. Now if you look into the syntax, file object read of size. So if you just need to exclusively read limited number of characters within a particular file, this command usage is ideal. So for example, if we just need to read the first 5 characters, f dot read 5. So print f dot read 5 just generates first 5 characters. We have also an important function module called with. So here in with, it ensures all the resources allocated to the file objects, and it gets deallocated automatically once we stop using the files. Now moving upon to the next aspect of how to write to an existing file. First of all, for writing out to an existing file, you need to add a parameter to the open function, because open function is a very vital one. That is actually opening an existing file. If at all a file is not at all created, we open it and we write it if it is an existing one. Or else we focus upon the other vital areas or the other access modes which we have already discussed before in the previous slides. Now here we look into the two type of modes, the append as well as write. So the append mode, as I told you before, will be appending new content to the end of the file, and W will be overwriting the existing content. Now if you look into this example, we open a file name called sample.txt. Assume the sample.txt as a line India is my country. We open this file in an appended mode. After the file has been opened and transferred to the file object, to this appended mode we just write new content. So new contents are written with the syntax file object dot write. Now, as you see in the second line, we have some lines, a line of codes that is written within inverted commas. So that to the existing text, this thing will be added to the end of the line. So it's always a good practice that we close all the file objects so that unwanted memory can be saved. And let us see another example of reading mode also. So once it is appended, and again if we go for a reading, the new content will be present here. So if you look at the output, India is my country, now the file has more content. Since we have already appended this statement, the new output shall include these two lines. Moving on to the write mode. Now write mode, as I told you before, is used for creating a non-existing file. If at all a file is existing, it shall be overwriting it the content. Now if you look into the syntax, we create a file object first after opening it, and we specify W mode. So here assume if the sample text had the content India is my country, and once it has been opened in the W mode, we replace that content with whoops, I deleted the content. And later on when we once again read the content, we can see that a drastic change has happened. As I told you before, to an existing file, when it has been opened to a file object exclusively in write mode, the content will be replaced. So moving on to the other methods and functions associated with file objects. Now as I already told you, it's always a good practice that you close the file objects after its usage. Why? Because we could release up the resources that is used by file. Since once a file is closed, we will not be using the file object anymore. And If we need to reassign the same file object to another file, then Python automatically closes the file. Moving on to the next function, assume we have a text file with n number of lines, and if we need to generate out contents line by line. So let's move on to the next function, read lines. Now this read lines is accessed through file objects. So file object dot read line, this is the syntax of using a read line. So by using this, we can generate we can return a line read as a string from the file. The more the number of times when we call a read line, that many number of times the contents will be retrieved line by line. So if we just call, now assume if the content of the file has 10 lines. So the first access using a file object using the command read line will generate out the first line. So if you open a file object, say for example f of a file sample.txt, so f.readline, it shall generate out the first line. Again, if we make a call to the second one, the second line within the text will be generated out, and it keeps on thing. We could also have an aliter method of writing the same thing. We could also use a looping concept. Say for example, we generate out a line for line in file. For example, if we look into this example, f open sample.txt in the read mode. We use a temporary variable for x in the file object, and this x shall go to the beginning of the file, and it shall be reading out contents line by line and finally print them. So the read lines is used for reading the entire content of the line. So we need to be very much careful with respect to the size of memory required before using this function. So if at all the size of the file is huge, it's not advisable that we need to use this. And if we use this f.readlines, naturally it shall be returning lines separated by backslash. Now let us look into a few examples. Assume we have a data text as follows. The text has the following content: hello world, backslash n, this is my first program, backslash n, I am using Python language. Now if we just read the content and assign it to the file object lines, if we use file.readlines and if we print it, you may notice that in the output within each line there are two spaces. It's because it will be separating each sentences followed by a backslash n. Backslash n is equivalent to an ender space. So if you look into the output, hello world, we have two ender spaces followed by the second line, and then we go to the third line. So if we need to separate out the strings which is used in the file, it is all ideal that we use split lines. So content is a file object to which the file is being read, and then we use a dot parameter followed by split lines. So what happens is that we separate out parameters. Okay. Now moving upon to the very crucial aspect of the class, binary files. So binary files, as I told you in the beginning, is focusing on human readable aspect, non-human readable aspects. So this type of files are normally used for numerical operations. So I told you Python always considers everything as an object. Lists, tuples, dictionaries, everything. Every type of data type is being considered as an object. So every time during execution of a program, we may require to state or we may require to store the current state of the variable. Why? Because we need to retrieve them. So assume you are playing a video game. You have been playing for hours. You get tired at some point of time. You pause it, go somewhere else, refresh yourself, and then return back. So you presume that once you come back, the state at where you had paused, the original score, everything should be retrieved. You are under that impression. Similarly, for binary files, we need to retrieve them for later purpose from the present or the existing state. For this, we use the pickle module. So the pickle module is used to save the object structure along with the data. So as we use the concept of preservatives, pickling is a type of preservating method that is used for keeping food materials for longer storage duration. Coming to the technical aspect, the pickle module that we use in Python is used to save the object structure along with the data. We also use the concept of serializing and deserializing. The serialization process is the process of transforming data or an object which is stored in the RAM into a stream of bytes, which we call it as byte streams. Now, this byte streams in a binary file can be stored in a disk or database, which is later on sent through a network. I repeat, in a serialization process, we just transform the data or an object which is existing in the execution part of memory or the RAM into a stream of bytes, which we call it as byte streams. And this byte streams in a binary file is normally placed in a disk or a database, which is later on communicated through a network. Deserialization is the inverse process of serialization. So the data or an object form which was later converted to byte streams, the reverse action will be happening. The byte streams go back to the Python object format. So we have two main methods which are used in pickling: dump and load. So dump method is something equivalent to writing. The load method is something equivalent to reading. So here, ideally speaking, data is not at all written, but it is dumped. Similarly, data is not read but loaded. So let's see what is this dump method. So in this dump method, what initially happens is that the Python objects which were created initially is converted. I repeat. So this method is used to convert the Python objects for writing data into the binary file. So the file in which the data are to be dumped is to be opened in binary write mode. Now if you look into the syntax, dump of data underscore object file object. Now first of all, we initiate a particular object that has to be dumped, and we also have a file object where it obtains the content from the object is to be dumped. So the type of serialization process happens here. So objects which were already created will be converted to a binary file stream where it is converted to byte streams, and later on it is been written into disk, which is transferred via network. Let us see an example. Let us see an example of initially writing a record of a student with the following parameters: roll number, name, gender, marks. So we write the record into a binary file called binary.date. Now, if you look into this programming lines, we import the pickle module. We list out the different parameters. The next thing, we are generating out a file object. We need to enlist out this list values into a binary file format, which we have named here as mybinary.data in the write format. Since we are dealing with writing and particularly with binary files, we use WB. So so what I'm trying to say is that the parameters which are listed in the list values will be incorporated to this file object, and that is made possible through the keyword dump. So we first of all we import the keyword pickle, we import the module pickle, and that module will be accessing the method called dump. So pickle.dump list values comma file object. It means that the various listed parameters are written to this file object. In short, we are going to serialize the aspect. So this is the main method of dumping. Next we have the load method. Now the load method is just the reverse process. It is just a reverse or deserialization process. So in short, we can say it as an unpicking method or process from a binary file. So during the dumping method, we write some contents to a binary file, and it is to be loaded now here. So obviously, to be loaded, it's a type of reading process. Since we are dealing with binary format, we use RB. So the syntax used here is store object, load file object. Now in the file object, we have already contents which is written in the binary format. So here the pickled Python object is loaded from the file, and the file handle is already named as file object, which is stored into a new file called store object. So we use a right hand to left hand type of conversion. To the file which is already been existing, that is been allocated to a new store object. Now if we look into the programming example, we import pickle. So pickle is a module here, and then we print some stuff. So since my binary dat is already been created during the dumped method, we are just going to load it. That is all what is happening here. So we open the file using the RB mode, reading in binary format, and we assign it to the another variable, and later on we just print it. So this is all what we have seen. So before winding up the class, let me just summarize what we have seen. So we have discussed vital functions which are used in file handling. We have discussed what is a file object. We have discussed what is a file, what is the necessity of storing data into a secondary storage. We have also looked into various access modes that are used with file operations, like reading, writing, appending, R+, W+, X mode. We have also seen the different type of files used. We have also looked into different other methods like read lines. And finally, for binary files, we have focused on two type of methods: dumping method and loading method. So I hope the concepts are clear. Thank you.